If you ask doctors what the hardest part of their job is, most immediately mention one thing: delivering bad diagnoses. In this video, however, we're taking that to the extreme, because today we're showing you some of the most unbelievable diagnoses doctors have ever had to make. Included are absolute bombshells for young adults, diagnoses that only a single person in the entire world has, but also a few bizarre diagnoses that you'd never think were even possible. Let's start with Jet Wilson. He, or rather his parents, received an unbelievable diagnosis when he was still a very small child. As a baby, Jet caught an infection that caused his left leg to grow much more slowly than his right leg. Behind this, by the way, was a serious medical error, but more on that in a moment. As a young boy, the uneven growth of his legs didn't have major consequences yet, but by now, Jet's left leg is much shorter than his right. This also means that Jet essentially has two different body heights. When he stands on his right leg, he's about 1 meter and 68 centimeters tall, but on his left leg, he's only 1 meter and 45 centimeters. In fact, doctors originally believed that Jet would not be able to walk by the time he was a teenager. Today, he is 32 years old and can still walk. This is partly because he has custom-made orthopedic sneakers and now owns a collection of special sneakers worth over $100,000. But how can he afford that? Well, Jet was always extremely ambitious despite, or maybe even because of, his disability. In his early 20s, he began his career as a rapper and music producer, and over the years became a real social media phenomenon. Today, he earns hundreds of thousands of dollars per year and also has a family. He and his girlfriend Angel have a 6-year-old son. Together, the couple posts regularly on social media, and it's clear that the small family seems to be living a cheerful life. But let's see what was the medical mistake that caused Jet's disability. When Jet was just 1 week old, he had to be given intravenous medication for medical reasons. The problem was that the tube inserted for this was contaminated with bacteria. These bacteria then spread into his leg and caused it to grow much more slowly. Let's continue with an unbelievable diagnosis that had Indian doctors puzzling for days many years ago. But let's start from the beginning. On May 18th, 1999, an ambulance sped through the streets of India. Inside lay 36-year-old Sanjiv Dagat, who was already preparing himself to die. His abdomen had grown to unimaginable proportions and was so distended that it was close to bursting. Immediately after he arrived, Indian doctors took X-rays of his abdomen, but they couldn't make any sense of them. Ultrasound images also gave no clarity about what on earth could be inside Sanjiv's abdomen, except that part of it was fluid. But during the CT scan, things got truly terrifying. The scan showed a gigantic dark mass that took up almost his entire abdominal cavity. No water, no belly fat, no enlarged organs, just an unknown mass. The doctors had no choice but to surgically open Sanjiv's abdomen. They discovered that the mass was surrounded by a membrane. When they cut it open, nearly 20 kilograms of oily fluid poured out, but the real miracle appeared afterward. When the doctor reached into the abdominal cavity, he suddenly touched a shriveled hand. It was, of course, a complete shock. It turned out that Sanjiv had actually had a twin, whose fetus he had carried inside him for over 30 years. The unbelievable part was that this fetus was still alive and had been surviving the entire time as a parasitic twin feeding off the nutrients in Sanjiv's body. This ultra-rare condition is called fetus in feto and is usually diagnosed much earlier. To this day, Sanjiv's case remains the most spectacular instance of this rare malformation ever recorded. Next, we come to Natasha Coats from Nottingham, England. Her unbelievable illness began in 2012 and seemed harmless at first. She developed an allergy to apples, but soon other fruits began to trigger allergic reactions in Natasha as well. So she went to the doctor, who had shocking news for her. Natasha had mast cell activation syndrome. This is a rare immune system disorder that causes a person to become allergic to almost everything. The frightening thing is that with mast cell activation syndrome, patients can sometimes have allergic shock reactions out of nowhere because their immune system suddenly starts producing an extreme allergic response. In Natasha's case, the syndrome is so severe that during her youth, she suffered over 240 anaphylactic shocks. She often passed out during these episodes or ended up in the emergency room. But even aside from that, everyday life is extremely difficult for her. Literally every small stimulus triggers allergic reactions. Even the growth of her own hair is why she has worn a shaved head for several years. Even Natasha's own tears cause allergy symptoms, and her sweat leads to intense itching. But still, she tries to live as normal a life as possible. She has a service dog named Ace, and is actually also a talented gymnast. As a gymnast with a disability, she won 48 medals at national gymnastics competitions. Not far from Natasha lives another young Brit who is trying not to let his illness defeat him, but that's easier said than done. Jordan Adams is the youngest person ever diagnosed with Alzheimer's. At just 23 years old, doctors told him that he had early onset Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. The cause is a gene that his mother, aunt, and grandmother all carried. This same gene was found in Jordan's DNA, meaning he already knows he will hardly be able to remember anything by the time he's 40, and will likely never reach the age of 50. The only good news is that memory loss progresses extremely slowly in his variant of Alzheimer's, and it will still take several years before Jordan notices it significantly. Until then, he has set himself an incredible goal. He uses all his energy to advance research and treatment for dementia-related illnesses. He appears on numerous talk shows to raise awareness of the issue. He also organised a highly publicised charity run in which he and his brother Kian ran the entire length of Great Britain to raise funds for research. Speaking of his brother, he shares the same fate and the same diagnosis as Jordan. The two brothers are also actively involved in dementia research at the University of London, for example, as test patients. Who knows, maybe they will be the ones who bring major breakthroughs to the world in the fight against Alzheimer's and other types of dementia. Next, we come to what may be the most touching person on this list, if not one of the most touching people on the planet. His name is John Hudson from New York. As a child, he was diagnosed with epidermolysis bullosa, also known as butterfly disease. As a result, John's body is permanently covered in open wounds. He suffered extreme pain and had already lost half of his skin by his teenage years. To get through everyday life at all, his body is wrapped in bandages almost everywhere, and he spends most of his time lying down as this position causes him the least pain. Precisely because of these unimaginable torments, John is an incredibly strong person. In an interview, he said that people have told him that through his life he helps them and that he inspires them. And John thinks, if my pain is the price I have to pay to help others, then I gladly accept it. That's what an incredibly moving human being he is. And his mother is just as remarkable. She takes care of her son with immense devotion. But there may be a glimmer of hope. Last year, the first medication for epidermolysis bullosa was approved in the United States, a sign that research on this extremely painful and rare disease is finally making progress. Next, we come to a diagnosis that is truly unbelievable, and one that hundreds of young women in India received. It is called puppy pregnancy syndrome, and it shows how a lack of education can make people sick. In rural Indian villages, young women repeatedly believed that they were pregnant with puppies. More specifically, they believed that shortly after being bitten by a dog, they were carrying puppies inside their abdomen. This is medically impossible, of course, but it happens so often that doctors eventually classified this misconception as a separate diagnosis, the puppy pregnancy syndrome. The crazy part is that many women still believe they are pregnant with puppies, which is why, for example, healers sell them special herbs meant to cause an abortion. Which diagnosis in this video did you find the most shocking?